Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. For those of you who were here for the tours, I just want to thank you for that as well. If you did not join us for a tour, at the end of tonight's presentation, we will have the dates and times for the future tours prior to the January 16th vote. While this is not a school board meeting, it does feel appropriate in this setting with our community here to have such an important conversation for us to stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you would please join me if you are able. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, so prior to tonight, obviously there was no system for an RSVP, but we were taking some small wagers on how many folks we would have in the audience versus how many at home. And I'm pleased to say that well over 200 people took a tour this evening, which is terrific. And I'd be willing to bet we have over 300 people here in the audience. So thank you for being here. For your friends and family who were not here, it's certainly being recorded, it's being streamed live, and it will be posted on our YouTube page and Facebook page. So to get started here, my name is Todd Bauer. I'm the superintendent here in the North Penn School District. I was the principal here at North Penn High School quite a few years ago, and I'm very pleased to be presenting this information to you this evening. So first, just to kind of lay out the plan for this evening, it's important to say we're hoping to have a roughly 45-minute presentation, followed by 45 minutes of question and answer. Okay, and the opportunity here this evening is for a Q&A, and we want to answer as many questions as we can. So when we're done with the presentation, we will have folks running around with microphones. We have some folks up here monitoring social media. We also have an email account set up so people can email in their questions, and we're going to try to balance the live questions here, the live questions online, and the submitted questions as well. But I just want to highlight the fact that this is not the type of situation where you stand up and offer 3 minutes of public comment. Rather, it's really directed to a question and answer, so we can answer every question that is still lingering out there. The objective tonight is to clearly define the project, clearly define what's at stake on January 16th, and outline what a yes versus a no is, and why we're here. So we will provide an overview of how we got here. There are some multimedia and some videos in here to kind of outline the process and how long we've been working at this. We're going to give a review of the literature. There happens to be quite a timely study that came out just this summer out of Yale University regarding referenda and their impacts on not only student achievement and assessment and learning, but also on home values. So we're going to outline that research. We're also going to talk about 9th grade here at North Penn High School and why in North Penn we are the only school district that does not have 9th grade at our high school campus in Bucks or Montgomery County. We're certainly going to take some time to show you some of the proposed design elements, and then most importantly, I know many people want to know, well, what is this going to cost me? So Mr. Scrocky will outline the tax implications, the real estate tax implications, and he'll even walk you through the average tax bill and what that would look like over the next 32 years. And then, of course, we want to leave some time for the Q&A at the end. So here's a timeline, and this presentation, the slides themselves, will be posted after the presentation. So please look at this in detail, but we do have a video that kind of outlines how we got here. But in general terms, and to give you the abridged version, we started these conversations in 2018. We had community forums. I'm hopeful that some of you were there at Pembroke, and we met and we talked about the project and the renovation. We started to get estimates. We started heading down a programming phase, and then unfortunately in 2020, everybody knows what happened, and we really took a step back. So initially, when we hired our architects to kind of do our Knapp Elementary School, which was the last of the elementary schools to be renovated, and then the stadium and North Penn High School, really North Penn High School was the third of those 3 projects, and it fell by the wayside for a couple years. So we are now on the precipice of determining what direction are we going to take moving forward. Here's further detail. Again, there is a video kind of showing this process coming up. But throughout our process, we've had hundreds of community members, staff members, administrators, And outside organizations participate in focus groups, in surveys, in just conversational, and in my meetings with the community as well to get feedback. We've sat with groups of teachers, we've sat with groups of kids, we surveyed all 1,000 ninth graders in 2021-22 to really get their input on what they thought we should be looking at when it comes to a high school. What are the priorities of this community? What do we want in our high school that represents the North Penn School District? So in no particular order, you see here on the slide in front of you the priorities that we heard from the community through that process. One, inclusivity and accessibility. Those who took a tour tonight know that much of the building is not ADA accessible for students with disabilities. We want a space that is flexible and adaptable. We want a building that is safe and secure. We want to create opportunities for collaboration and problem solving. We want it to be a community center and a sense of pride here in North Penn. We want to contribute some sustainability features. We want to have an outdoor connection to the learning. And we want it to be prideful in terms of branding for the North Penn School District. So now we're going to start to talk a little bit about ninth grade. And to put it simply, ninth grade is high school. In school code, high school is grades 9 through 12. We in North Penn, like I said earlier, this year we are the only school district in Montgomery County that does not have ninth grade on their campus. Our ninth graders are spread across 3 middle schools. And I'll show you some data in a moment that tell you how many of them have to get bussed up here to take advantage of the opportunities that we offer at North Penn High School. But everything from academics to social and collaboration among the staff, there's a reason why 98% of the high schools across the country have ninth grade in their high school. So just to outline some of the benefits and some of the things that our students don't have the opportunity to do that other school districts' ninth graders do. Whether it's limited opportunity or no opportunity, you see the list before you. And certainly if you've been following along, you've seen these things. But our ninth graders don't have access to the AP courses here at the high school or a dual enrollment classes that give you college credit and high school credit at the same time. Certain language courses are not options for our ninth graders that are options here for our 10th through 12. Our marching band director told me today, he said we had 19 ninth graders in the marching nights this year, and he attributes much of that to the fact that they're not here. They're not a part of that community here on campus. Our JROTC program, we struggle with enrollment with ninth graders because they're not here with the rest of their high school peers. Our engineering academy is not an option for our ninth graders. We cannot have them take engineering classes. Our community-hosted internship program, and then of course the clubs and activities offered, whether it's throughout the day or after school. This does not take into account athletics. Certainly when you have ninth grade teachers in the same building, in the same hallway, in the same cluster as their 10th, 11th, and 12th grade colleagues, the collaboration is important for our staff as well. And then of course I listed here student leadership opportunities and participation in school events. So I mentioned that we did some research with our ninth graders. In 2022, so this is the year after the 21-22 school year, we surveyed all ninth graders to ask them about their experiences as ninth graders in the North Penn School District in the middle school. So the data you see here represents the entire class. And you'll see that 13% of them, the left-hand column here, is the curricular offerings. 13% of our ninth graders start their day prior to their middle school peers, get on a bus, come up to the high school, go back to the middle school after they take their high school classes, right? So there's some buffer time and wasted time in there. They have their course offerings, and then many of them come back to the high school, whether it be for athletics or something else in the evening. So 13% of our kids say they take advantage of the opportunities here that we offer for the ninth graders. Meanwhile, 64% said they would have if ninth grade was in the high school and if they were there with their peers. You'll see on the right-hand side regarding extracurricular activities, 31% of our kids take a bus at the end of the day and come up to the high school to access the extracurricular activities. Meanwhile, the rest of them said I would have if ninth grade was in our high school. This slide, and this probably looks familiar as well to many, speaks to the social development. Ninth grade is high school, and I know our community here is not familiar with that. It's not what we've done in North Penn, but in 98% of the high schools around the country, ninth grade is a part of the high school. It's more socially appropriate, and it lends itself to more leadership opportunities and collaboration with our students. It also helps with the transition to adulthood. It helps with programming for our students, whether it is a student with disabilities, and support the programmings that we can offer here at the high school. And when you bring your resources from 3 different locations together, you can increase your efficiencies and your support of your students. So, I referenced at the top of the hour here the research from a study out of Yale University that came out just in July this summer. And you'll see here that they looked at 15,000 referenda from across the country in 28 different states. They targeted referenda that were close one way or the other within 15%. So not one that was all in yes or all in no, but the close ones. And they measured the impacts on student learning based upon that electoral debt referendum and its impact on student achievement and home values. So this slide, I think, is potentially one of the most important slides that you'll see this evening. 3 primary findings. Number 1, out of those 15,000 referenda for bond issuances for school projects, on average, approving a school bond was associated with a statistically significant improvement with student test scores, 0.08 standard deviation after 5 to 8 years of the election itself. Additionally, bonds designated for infrastructure upgrades had a pronounced impact on test scores, increasing 0.17 standard deviations on average. For those who are not mathletes, no problem. If you think of a standard bell curve and 1 standard deviation, that's about 34%. So a 0.17 standard deviation is about a 6% increase in student performance and test scores. 6% may not sound like a lot, but I can tell you if we have a 6% increase in student performance, that's dramatic and certainly statistically significant. Furthermore, point 3, I want to point out that the approval of a school bond led to a 7% increase in property value over 5 to 8 years. They then disaggregated what type of upgrades and how much did property values increase in that community. And the variation depending upon these types of upgrades with a 12% impact due to expansion of classroom spaces and a 26% impact on home values for athletic facility improvements. So some brief background on the current building, and this is something we've shared throughout this process, is the building itself, the original part of North Penn High School, excluding K-Pod and the natatorium, which is down this hallway here, was built in 1971. It has not been renovated or touched since. It is the oldest building in the district that has not been renovated. It is the oldest high school in the county that has not been renovated. Some folks have asked questions about the middle schools. Our middle schools were renovated in the 90s and early 2000s. So some decisions were made in the 90s and the 2000s about those renovations, but they've been renovated nearly 30 years more recently than this building. So much of this building has been untouched. So when K-Pod went to the front of the building due to booming student population, we did eventually add 900 students to the facility. What we didn't do was impact the wayfinding, the arteries in the building, the hallways, the pinch points, and the traffic flow. So putting that addition on the front of the building certainly housed classrooms, but it didn't improve the overall efficiency and effectiveness of the original structure itself. You'll see some of that in the videos as well. So, just to point to some of the programmatic changes that have happened since 1971, and please trust me that this is not an all-inclusive list, but I do want to highlight that instruction has changed, right? Classrooms should not be looking like they did in 1970. Students don't learn in the same ways. Kids are different, that's for sure. They certainly have different resources and tools at their fingertips. So no longer is it an industrial age where students are learning in an assembly line where they're all facing the same direction, they're receiving information, and then they regurgitate it back on a test. That's not what learning is supposed to look like in 2023 and beyond. It's supposed to be participatory. It's supposed to be collaborative, critical thinking, problem solving, group work, interdepartmental, where this department's working with that, and they're coming together to work together to solve real world problems. It's very different. Some of the things that you or I had to do when we were in high school, we can just pull our phone out, say, hey Siri, and get those answers, right? So things are very different. But on top of the instructional practices and what's supposed to be happening in classrooms, you'll see things such as the technology, art programs that have been added since 1971, broadcasting and television, our preschool labs, strength training, JROTC, comprehensive music tech, and then on the right side, you'll see those athletics and activities. And again, that is not all inclusive. These are all things that have been added since 1971 with no changes to the facility itself. Okay, so at this point, we're going to transition to a video that I keep saying that you'll see the video that kind of explains the background or the process. That's this video, and then following the video, you will hear from Mr. Schrader, our architect.
We've been meeting and we've been talking. We certainly understand the need to address the high school and the renovation needs, the infrastructure there. We also know that when we go and do a renovation project, it's not very likely that we're going to return anytime soon. So we need to take a look at the programmatic needs of the high school. For example, if you're looking at a science lab and you're expecting you're not going to be back there for another 20, 30, 40, who knows how many years, you want to make sure that you have the right kind of facility in place to be able to meet the needs well into the future.
Okay, so I have the honor and privilege of sharing with you a little bit about the process for exploring the opportunity or the option of moving 9th grade to the high school campus. And as Dr. Dietrich just described, there are so many questions. What does our grade structure look like at the elementary, middle, high school level? Do we want to move 9th grade to that campus? If so, what are the concerns? What are the benefits? And ultimately, we decided that this was the first question that needed to be answered. As the world came to a screeching halt due to the pandemic, and things have changed. Financially, from a construction aspect, and the way in which we conduct business in the North Penn School District and beyond. So really thrilled to be here to talk about this and get the conversation started.
The decision to reimagine North Penn High School as a 9 through 12 building has been 5 years in the making. After a comprehensive facilities feasibility study in the beginning of 2018, North Penn began engaging the community through community forums, public meetings with staff, parents, and students about the needs of North Penn High School. North Penn administrators have been engaging our local lawmakers and continue to provide consistent updates to our community during school board meetings. Community engagement has been a crucial aspect of the process. Your input has played a vital role in shaping how we can reimagine North Penn High School. Through this process, we engaged in developing the plan, addressing concerns, and ensuring that the expansion aligned with the educational needs of all children. Students were not left out of the conversation either. Student engagement sessions were organized, allowing the young minds of North Penn High School to express their thoughts on the proposed expansion, adding a dynamic element to the decision-making process. After all the feedback, estimates for the expansion project were meticulously calculated, taking into account construction costs, staffing requirements, and the long-term benefits for the community. Clear and transparent communication has been at the heart of these discussions. When the community decided nearly 30 years ago to expand North Penn High School with the addition of K-Pod, the need to renovate the original 1971 high school was even then a pressing topic.
You will see very clearly that there are built-in bottlenecks to this plan relative to trafficking. We need to do something about getting from A-Pod to H-Pod. What I'm saying here, to sum it up, is that I'm asking for us to consider in any plan we do the fact that this current high school is 25 years old and needs work,
The plan to reimagine North Penn High School as a 9 through 12 building addresses these issues. If the community decides to maintain the status quo, several generations of students will continue with the dysfunctional flow of the 1971 building that was built to house 2,400 students.
I was just looking at a newspaper from November 12th, a reporter actually from November 12th, but it was from November 12th, 1971, and I have it in my hand right here. It's a beauty. 47-year-old newspaper from when the North Penn High School dedication took place. And on the dedication ceremony on November 14th, 1971, United States Senator Richard Schweiker said this: "When I was looking through the school booklet describing the school's programs of studies, I came across this quotation: 'Behold the turtle, he makes progress only when he sticks his neck out.' For in effect, this building, to me, says this community stands for education. We want to make progress in education. We're not afraid to stick our neck out to do it. Bricks and mortar alone are not going to produce education, but we can't produce education unless we have some bricks and mortar. Fortunately, in this school, you have the right combination of bricks and brains. It was 47 years ago when we were extremely proud of a state-of-the-art, brand new high school that was above industry standard, that had things that nobody else had.
In the 1960s, the North Penn community had a vision of what our school system should be and made that vision a reality, providing instructional spaces that were unheard of in a high school at that time. A planetarium, fully stocked chemistry labs, language and communication labs, electronics, business labs, consumer science, computer programming, a full broadcast TV studio, and even a greenhouse. The conversation then is very much the same today. Why do we need to change? How is reimagining the North Penn High School facility going to increase academic rigor, and why does it need to be a focal point of this North Penn community?
It really is a moment, and hindsight is 2020. So we're making a decision now, not for just us, but for our children and our children's children. And do we want 9th grade on our high school campus? Just like every other school district in Bucks and Montgomery County and 98% of the school districts across the country.
The culmination of our extensive community engagement process has led the North Penn School District to this critical moment, a special election scheduled for January 16, 2024. Our community must continue to be informed, ask questions, and understand the transformative nature of this vote. A vote that will not only impact students in school today, but will continue to impact our community and future generations to come.
Well, that's a tough act to follow. I'm David Schrader. I'm representing part of the architectural team. Hopefully those of you who made it around the tours met a number of the other team as well. We probably had 10 representatives here this evening, so very excited to be part of this. What I'm going to describe, for those of you that didn't see everything, is the referendum yes vote. It is the vision. It is bringing 9th grade to the site. I'm going to take a short detour for a second to show what happens if we don't go that direction. But ultimately, this is about this site. And what you're seeing on the screen right now is the site as it stands, and you can certainly see South Valley Forge Road at the bottom of the site. You see Snyder Road on the right-hand side, and you see Sumneytown Pike on the left. On the top is the North Montco Tech Career Center, and the building sits essentially in the center of it. Stadium renovations were done to the stadium in the upper left-hand corner. The circulation for parent drop-off and parking is, as you know it, at the bottom of the site, and there's a bus loop on the right-hand side of the site. And I'm setting it up like this so you can get a sense of where the balance of the site goes, because many of you were looking at interior renovations as you walked around. The light blue, tough to see, is the old NPV station site, and that is a site that has not been developed as of yet, but is owned by the district. So we'll be talking about that. One other prime and critical area here is the transportation center that sits between the light blue and the stadium. So following some of Dr. Bauer's goals, or at least what he articulated as the district goals at the beginning of this process, we also followed with a series of concept design elements. And those are, in many ways, the things that you folks saw as you circulated through the building. I know a number of you didn't get through all of the different videos, and so we'll make sure that we highlight all of those here. The goal, though, with this is to inspire innovation and collaboration throughout the building, provide accessibility for everyone throughout, and you'll see that as part of the circulation patterns that we talk about, creating a central space, and some of you made it through the common space, which is over in what currently is J-Pod area. That space would be a morning, day, and night space. It will be occupied continuously throughout the day and the evening. It'll be pre and post activity, it'll be lunch, it'll be all of the activities that happen throughout a building like this. It'll articulate main circulation routes throughout the center of the building. We'll talk about the grouping of these primary functions throughout the facility so that you know where you're going in the facility when you want to get to a certain place. And that includes different circulation management throughout the building and wayfinding. There's a heavy emphasis on STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math spaces. Those are gathered, as those of you who saw that, around the media center or library space in the center of the building. and then as much as possible trying to bring daylighting into this building. You'll see that throughout many of the videos. Finally, the challenges of today bring with them security issues. We do that and handle that through a series of ways throughout the project and can talk more about how it's done both physically as well as from a transparency standpoint. So those are the ideas behind the initial concepts, and they're kind of articulated in the site image here, the biggest being the arrow that runs left to right more or less in the building, and that is the new Main Street that runs through the center of the site. The site itself, a couple of things to hit on the site. This was probably not as heavily talked about during the walkthroughs that you went around on. There is now in the concept plan here, you do see the same parent drop-off circulation at the bottom of the site, and what you will see on the right-hand side is an expanded bus parking area, bus drop-off area, with separate areas for accessing that so that the buses do not cross the parent drop-off traffic. The transportation center does get moved in this option, and what happens is between the stadium area and what was the radio station site, you get a large parking area. My guess is in the future, much of that will be taken up by student parking, but of course, administration can determine how that happens. What it does do, though, is it allows a great parking area to reach a lot of the athletic fields and the competition areas that you currently do not have back there on the site. So it provides accessibility to the site activities as well. Finally, another item here is you see a new roadway that bisects basically from Snyder Road to Sumney Town Pike and vice versa. So the idea is to try to create an access point from Sumney Town Pike so that we do have a secondary access point across the site to allow for that circulation to be improved and not just all handled off of South Valley Forge Road. The playing fields do get relocated as part of this concept, and the radio station site supports a number of practice and athletic activities both for baseball and softball and some additional recreation fields. We do take into account the performing arts as well, so there is a marching band area in that part of the property as well. And then the area that was previously playing fields on the left-hand side of the site really are mostly multi-purpose fields. The quick veer to the no vote just gives you a sense on the site of what the anticipated goals are. The building stays essentially as it is. It does have a small music addition, but what happens inside is it gets fully gutted and fully renovated so that it has all new finishes and all new building systems. As you heard when you went around and heard a little bit about some of the things that you saw, we are not reconfiguring the building in the no vote, though. So the same spaces will be set up in the same ways that they currently are. One of the goals, though, is to try to improve the site by utilizing the radio station area for playing fields and then to also improve the parking areas where the current transportation site was. So those items do get taken care of as part of that portion of the site. So we're going to do a couple of the fly-throughs for those of you who didn't see these, and we'll start out with what we call the commons space. So the commons space is intended to go where J-Pod goes, and on the left-hand side here you see what would be a new competition gymnasium area. Would allow you to have full competition for the quantity of students that you have as a high school, and certainly as you transition to a 4,000 student ninth grade facility, or fully encumbered when it has 9,000 students on the site. It will have 4,000, ninth grade, it'll have 4,000 students, pardon me. The idea of the commons, though, is a morning through evening space. It'll be used for dining during the midday points, but it will also allow full access through to the Main Street area that we'll show you shortly. It allows access to all of the athletic areas and provides for access also to the performing arts at the space that you're currently in. So it can be a pre and post function space for evening activities as well as daytime activities. So this gives you a little sense. You're looking back at the Audion there. You can see it in the background, and the center of this space is essentially where J-Pod is today, to give you a sense of where that would be located. And it connects both floors of the facility at this point and connects you to the lower level of Main Street and the upper level of Main Street. Let's go ahead and hit the Main Street video. The idea behind Main Street, you can see the commons area on the left-hand side, is to take all of the current circulation points that run back and forth in the building, as well as what is currently the main office area, and take that down to essentially the structure. And that allows you to open up a very wide circulation point. And one of the points that we made earlier to folks was the current corridor is 12 feet wide. Generally, our office and most of the offices who design schools will design a 12-foot wide corridor as a main corridor for a 500 to 700 student elementary school. So imagine the 500 to 700 smaller students circulating through a building like that, and then take today, where you have 3,000 students circulating through that point, add 9th grade, and eventually you'll have 4,000 circulating through. So what this is meant to do is to become a main artery through the building and allow you to connect back and forth to all of the access points to the different parts of the building. One last point here is we'd like to really utilize some of your courtyard areas. And so in a case like this, where you have your main courtyard at the back of the facility, we would open up this area to that to allow a good indoor-outdoor connection between the outdoor portions of the building and your educational spaces. The next spot we'd like to hit is what you folks know as A33 in APOD. It's the LGI today, and it'll become a future LGI as well. What you probably don't know is that if you take the walls down and continue to use the structure that is there, this is what you have. So you currently have a tiered space in there. Right now you've got fixed seating and fixed desks. If you take the walls down between the corridors and that area between the first and second floor and allow us to pop the ceiling up to bring daylighting into the center, you could have something that looks like this. And what's great about this opportunity is it provides for an educational process, very creative process, that allows for research, make, and present. And so the opportunity to present in any part of the building is there right outside of all the learning studios. We thought we'd share with you what a classroom renovation might look like off of this, so we'll go to the next video. If you were coming up that current tiered area in A33 and move to one of these classroom areas that you currently have, and look at those as if you could create a little bit more transparency. And again, we're in a very conceptual phase. There are 18 months of design to go here. So the ideas here are very high-level ideas. They will all get tempered as time goes on, and they'll all get adjusted specifically to North Penn desires and needs. But you can see more daylighting come into the spaces. You see quite a bit more technology, much more lighting, and of course, as I said, daylighting into the space with all new finishes and all new systems. So it gives you a good sense of what a renovation could really look like compared to what you already saw. One of the biggest spots that you have in the facility is the media center today. And the media center is on the ground floor and has spaces over it. There's an opportunity there to remove some of the second floor and do the same thing we talked about in APOD and allow for daylighting into the space. And if you can imagine your STEAM spaces, again, science, technology, arts, and mathematics, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, you could imagine them gathered around this space with all of the technologies that they have and really looking at a great research, presentation, and making space around that. And so this is an opportunity to try to bring daylighting down into the current library, and believe it or not, those are the library spaces that you have today, just with part of the floor removed in an area of the current classroom area. And it gives you something like that. And if we go to the next video, you can start to see how that space with the technology spaces around it starts to work. And when you're talking about this kind of blend and gray zone between research and technology, which is where everything is going today, you have the opportunity to really open up some of these spaces. And so in this case, you're looking at some opportunities for VR and spatial computing spaces, some other types of technology spaces that all work directly off of that research space. So a pretty monumental change for education, pretty monumental change for the kind of space that you have in existing footprints that you currently are working with. So the next one moves to an interesting spot. It's the senior cafeteria. So imagining that the common space now becomes your dining space, you have the opportunity to reuse spaces in the building. This is an opportunity to take some of the technology education programs and locate them just behind the science and technology areas, directly adjacent to the research areas. Let's go to the auditorium, which you're currently sitting in. Very early concept for the auditorium. One of the great things about the space you have is it is a pretty large auditorium, and it does have reasonably good acoustics based on the shell that was created here. So the facility is ripe for renovation with all new systems, all new sound and lighting control systems throughout, and giving it a kind of a refresh to allow it to be a state-of-the-art auditorium. So this just gives you a sense of what that opportunity may be. There is still an opportunity for something that you've had in the past, which is pulling folding partitions across the balcony area and allowing for even more large group spaces. So rehearsal off of that, if we go to the next video, you folks probably saw some of the things that were talked about in CPOD. Again, a reuse of those central spaces, similar to the A33 concept, where you actually take the second floor area out. You have the opportunity to create the musical performance and practice areas that a band, orchestra, and a choral group of your district size need. So you can see the volume of the space there. And finally, if we pull back all the way and come back into the building here, we have to look at the additions and how they really work with the commons. Those are the two classroom additions that we're looking at. So there's a classroom number that we worked through, or a quantity of classrooms to bring 9th grade to this site. And if you saw what we talked about in APOD with the central common spaces and looked at how the classrooms are gathered around those, these are the new classroom pods. So they're 3-story rather than 2, so they match the height of K-pod, and they have the classrooms gathered around those presentation areas that you saw manifested in the APOD structure. And again, they have the glass to connect those spaces back and forth with the courtyards. And again, they're all internalized courtyards, so they're safe spaces for the students, and they offer the opportunity for indoor and outdoor learning in nice weather. If we go to the next one. So this is kind of the, we talked about the performing arts for the facility and what we try to do there. This takes into account the athletics in the district. And there's a series of renovations that would go on in the existing gymnasiums, and then we would add a competition gym commensurate with the student body that you have and the seating needs that you have, and provides a full competition gymnasium. This is an addition. So besides those 2 classroom addition cores that I just shared with you, this is the gymnasium addition, and it would be directly adjacent to the natatorium or pool area. And it connects all of those athletic spaces back and forth with the outdoor athletic spaces. And it gives you a sense of how something like that might look in the end. So finally, as you come full circle here and have gone through the whole facility, this video gives you a quick sense of how the additions might blend with and meld with the existing architecture in the building. The intent here would be to carry off of the K-pod architecture. You're seeing the expanded bus loop here, a new bus entry to try to highlight the end of Main Street so that you have a large volume area for students to move into the building. A-pod and B-pod and C-pod all renovated to accommodate the needs. And then there's a gymnasium additions off the edge of the building, and the renovations to all the playing fields, new parking areas, and the radio station site converted to athletic facilities as well. So Dr. Bauer, I hand it over to discuss the options a little bit further.
Thank you, David. And I feel like I have to address an elephant in the room. I watched that video that I'm going to give some props to Bob Gilmer back in the booth there, for those of you who know Bob and how talented he is. I look at that video, and Kevin Monero I see in the audience here. Kevin Monero looks the exact same at the Forum 5 years ago. His hair is still dark. Mine is not. I don't know what happened in the last 5 years, but Kevin, you need to share with me your secrets. But now to a yes or a no vote. And I really want to take some time to kind of outline what yes and no means specific to what Mr. Schrader just shared. So you'll see here, there are two figures down at the bottom of this slide. The yes vote, which would require the referendum, and the referendum, Mr. Scrocchi will speak more about that, is in the sum of roughly $97 million to bring 9th grade to the high school and to renovate and right-size the building itself. On the no vote, which does not do the right sizing of the building for the 3,000 or obviously adding another 1,000 students, is listed at $236 million. And I do think it's important to highlight the fact that you'll see in the print here on the slide, and again, these slides will be posted, but option 1 or a yes vote, and we've tried to move away to not confuse people, option 1 versus option 2, just yes or no. And in the yes vote, bringing 9th grade to the high school certainly has some options at the middle school. If you don't have 9th grade in your middle school, there are questions that evolve what's going to happen with 6th grade in our elementary schools. The most common grade structure is K to 5, 6 to 8, 9 to 12. That's the most common grade structure in public schools across the country. So there's questions about what happens with 6th grade. There's questions about what happens with the 3 middle schools themselves. Do we need all 3? Maybe 2 of those buildings could be 7 and 8. All 3 buildings need renovations. Penndale's actually the next one on the list in terms of when it was last renovated. But also, they've all been renovated since the 90s, all 3 middle schools. But many of you know that Pembroke, for example, has temporary modular construction since 1985. That temporary modular construction is still there at Pembroke. Penfield has a significant field of modulars as well. So there will be additional expenses under a no vote for the 3 middle schools that may not exist under a yes vote if 9th grade moves here. So again, we can't make all of these decisions at one time, but it's important to discuss them and bring them forward and talk about them. We need to decide what are we doing as a community with our 9th graders. If we want them at our high school, okay, what is the cost? And how much will that impact me and my family moving forward? Right? And so once we make that decision, then we move forward and we make other decisions over the next 10, 20, 30 years. So, Mr. Scrocchi, if you wouldn't mind coming up, and Mr. Scrocchi is our Chief Financial Officer, and he will very clearly outline the impacts of the referendum under and option 1 versus option 2 or yes and no.
Thank you, Dr. Bauer. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for attending tonight. You know, one of our goals was to make sure our community was informed about this project when casting the vote on the special election date in January. So you've taken a major step in accomplishing that goal. So kudos to you in person here and online. We thank you for that. So I'm going to talk about 3 primary things tonight. First, I'm going to talk about the cost estimates for the project, number 1. Second thing, I'm going to talk about the referendum itself, what that means, what's involved with that, and more importantly, why a referendum. And finally, we're going to walk through a couple specific taxpayer examples, how this project could potentially affect your taxes moving forward. Okay, fair enough. So first item we're going to talk about is the budget estimate assumptions. So I want to rewind a little bit because we did a number of community presentations back in the spring of this year, and we did share some budget estimates at that point in time. And those are really high-level budget estimates based on square foot numbers. So we went through a competitive process in the summer to hire a construction management firm, Dewey Engineering. We brought them on board in August. And they basically worked around the clock in August and September to develop engineering detailed cost estimates. And those estimates were shared with our school board at the October 10th school board meeting, or board work session, I should say. And Mr. Jamie Lynch presented the cost information in great detail. Probably it was about 30 to 45 minutes. We're going to distill that down into probably about 3 to 5 minutes in terms of covering the cost estimates. But a couple things I want to talk about the cost with these estimates. First off, this is a multi-year project, and we wanted to make sure that we were covering not the cost estimates today, but including escalation with respect to construction inflation, construction cost increases. And we did include a 4% annual construction inflation increase in the cost estimates. So we're not caught off guard with contractor escalation when we come to bid day. I also want to talk about two different types of costs. We call them hard costs and soft costs. Okay, hard costs are really all costs related to the building and site construction. So think of things when we talk about hard costs like bricks and mortar and dirt and concrete. That's really your hard construction costs, and you'll see them in the next slide. Soft costs are pretty much everything else. So think of our design fees, think of our permitting fees, think of technology for the building, think of furniture and equipment, think of contingency, and think of insurance. Those would be our soft costs. They are also factored in the overall cost. It's also important to know under both of the options, the yes vote and no vote, we are planning to move our transportation center, which is presently located on the high school site. So under either direction, we really feel that we need to increase the flexibility for the space on the site by moving the transportation center. So those numbers are really baked into both options. And you might be wondering, well, where is the transportation center going to move? Well, that's a good question. We don't know just yet. We are engaged with the services of a real estate broker right now. We've been working with that broker for about the past 2 months. We've reviewed a couple dozen properties already. We have a short list that we're focusing in on, but if you're aware of anything like 15 to 20 acres that's available for sale, perhaps we don't know about it, please let us know, because we are looking to make that transaction, that acquisition, as soon as possible. Okay, so let's get into the specific cost information now. And the cost information is broken out by doing engineering and really into 2 columns. The first we have, for the yes vote, we have the project costs not related to the 9th graders moving to the high school campus. And the second part is really the referendum piece. That's the 9th graders moving to the high school campus and the costs associated with that. So first off, in the upper left, the transportation facility, the cost estimate for that is $17.25 million. That includes site acquisition. That includes site costs to develop the site to get it ready. That also includes constructing the building, the bus depot where the garages and offices would be housed, $17.25 million. So that portion has nothing to do with the referendum simply because the transportation relocation is going to occur under either option. It has nothing to do with the 9th graders moving on to campus. So under the referendum cost, you see a 0. Hazardous material abatement and off-site traffic, that is really going to happen regardless of whether the 9th graders come to the campus or not. So that figure is identified at $6 million, nothing for the referendum cost. Now for the next 3 items, we get into a split between what is required for the 9th graders and what is not required for the 9th graders. So the site work to develop the site, we have $25.568 million allocated for non-9th grade related, and we have $14.3 million that's been specifically identified as a result of moving the 9th graders to the campus. Building construction costs in a similar fashion, $180 million non-9th grade related, $62.89 million specifically to bring the 9th graders to the campus. And those are details specific for 9th graders. Soft costs, remember all these other costs like permitting fees and design fees and so forth, $77.3 million non-9th grade related, $20 million for 9th grade. Now here's the one area where an allocation had to be made. It's a little difficult to determine ahead of time precisely how much of the soft costs would be allocated to the 9th grade. So we used a figure of about 20.73% for just about every item under soft costs to come up with that number. Okay, so the breakdown again is $306 million non-9th grade related, $97 million 9th grade related. And that $97 million is the figure for the referendum. So let's talk about the referendum now. First, I want to mention that, in my opinion, I've said this at public meetings before, I think the referendum here is the truest form of democracy. This particular project, yes vote or no vote, this is not determined by the school board. It's not going to be determined by administration. It's going to be determined by you in the community. And I really like that idea. You have the choice between the yes vote and no vote, option 1, option 2. It is entirely in your hands with this referendum. So let's talk a little bit about why the referendum. And I need to give a little history lesson before I talk about that and what is really driving the recommendation for a referendum. We need to talk about this thing that's been around since 2006. It's called the Act 1 Index. And every school district in Pennsylvania has to comply with this Act 1 Index of 2006. And in a nutshell, what Act 1 Index does, it limits a school district's ability to raise taxes to a certain level each year. Okay, there's a couple exceptions to that. We'll talk about one exception here in a minute, but I'll give you an example. The Act 1 Index in the current fiscal year is 4.1%. And it's pretty much an inflationary index. There's a federal component to it, there's a state component to it. You average the two together, it yields the Act 1 Index. It's 4.1%. So that means in the current fiscal year, the maximum tax increase could have been 4.1% unless the district was eligible and applied for exceptions, which it did not. Okay, 4.1%. Historically, since 2006, the average has been about 2.8%. So right now, the Act 1 Index is at historical highs, okay? 4.1% this year is actually projected to go up to 5.3% next year, okay? So 2.8% is the historical average, however. So that $97 million for the referendum that we showed earlier, the reason why we're seeking the electoral debt referendum, and that's what this is called, this is a referendum to incur electoral debt, is simply because we can't pay for the entire $403 million for this project and fit that debt under the Act 1 Index. It's as simple as that. Carving out, moving the ninth graders to the campus, the $97 million, if that is incurred with electoral debt, what that means is taxes could be raised above the Act 1 Index to pay for that $97 million. All right, does that make sense? The remaining dollars that we're talking about here, the $306 million, that can be absorbed in the general fund budget within the Act 1 Index. The $97 million could not. So should the referendum pass, we have a situation, what's called an electoral debt referendum that passed. We could apply to the state each year and ask the state to approve an exception for us to raise taxes above the Act 1 Index. Okay. Now, in our financial modeling, we work with PFM, they're our financial advisors. We did detailed, complex budget projections for the next 32 years. And in all likelihood, that $97 million, we will pay that money back by exceeding the Act 1 Index in all likelihood based on our projections. Okay? And it's also important to note when we talk about tax implications and the cost of the project, we are talking about this project only tonight. Okay? We're not talking about the rest of the general fund budget. The general fund budget is determined on an annual basis. So when we talk about cost, we talk about tax impact tonight, it is for this project only. So in October 19th, our school board authorized and they passed a resolution to hold the special election on January 16th. So we've already notified the boards of election in Montgomery and Bucks County. And if you didn't know, we have about 80 properties located in Bucks County. So this special election will occur in 2 counties, just like the general election occurs. You can vote at the same polling places that you vote at now. That part won't be any different. Mail-in votes will be available also. So the ballot question has already been determined and has already been submitted to both boards of election. And there's very little leeway we had with this ballot question that's on the slide right now. There's really only 2 variables that we could input into the ballot question. What is the dollar amount that we're looking to borrow as part of the special election? And what is the project for? Everything else is prescribed by law. So if you go to vote on January 16th, the ballot question will read, shall debt in the sum of $97,318,376 for the purpose of new construction that includes space for 9th grade students to be educated on campus and renovations of the North Penn High School be authorized to be incurred as debt approved by the electors. That's it. That's all you will see when you cast a vote. Now, some people might say, well, that's very confusing. That's misleading. The project is $403 million. It's not just $97 million. We cannot put the $403 million total project number in the ballot question. So what we're going to do, we will have it's called a plain English statement, okay, at the polling locations that gets into a little bit more detail. Describes the project total being $403 million. It describes what a yes vote means. It describes what a no vote means, okay? But that's not actually part of the ballot question, but that literature will be available. I think it's also important to point out, in terms of referenda throughout the Commonwealth, there have been, I think, roughly 22 referenda for school districts for electoral debt in Pennsylvania. 2 out of those 22 have passed. The other ones failed. The 2 that passed were Upper Dublin and State College area school district. Upper Dublin's was passed, I think, somewhere around 2008. State College area school district was around 2016. Both were for high school projects. Okay, both were for high school projects. Okay, so now let's get into specific information about tax impact and what this particular project, what impact it could have on your taxes. And I'm going to start by kind of focusing in on that middle column. So if everyone could take a look and focus your eyes right now where it says assessed value $150,000. That's the column I'm going to focus on. We have a higher number than that and we have a lower number than that, but I'm going to use 150. Why? Because $150,000 is right around the average assessment of a residential property in North Penn School District. And for those of you that don't know, that your assessed value, that is determined by the Montgomery County Board of Assessment. That's not determined by the school district, that's determined by the Montgomery County Board of Assessment. And that's really the basis of your taxes. So to figure out your tax bill, you take your assessed value, you multiply that by the millage rate or the tax rate, and that gives you your tax bill. Okay, so we're going to focus in on that $150,000 number. So sometimes there's confusion with, well, my property is assessed at $150,000, but I know it's worth a lot more than that. So let's do a little conversion right now to get from the assessed value to what your property roughly is worth. And the reason why there's a difference between assessed value and what they call this implied market value is that Montgomery County has not done a reassessment of properties since 1998. So it's been a long time. So every year you go by that you don't have a new countywide reassessment, there's going to be a larger disparity between your assessed value and your implied market value. But the state is kind. They give us what's called a common level ratio each year. They give this out for every county in the Commonwealth. I think there's 67 counties in the Commonwealth. In Montgomery County, our common level ratio this year is 35.5%. So if I take the $150,000 assessed value, divide that by 35.5%, voila, I get $423,000 in implied market value. So the average residential implied market value of a property in North Penn School District is roughly $423,000. So if your property has an average assessment and you went to sell it, it's probably worth somewhere around there, okay? So again, we're going to focus on that middle column. So we plan on issuing bonds to finance this project. So very similar in some respects to a mortgage payment. We plan on doing 7 different borrowings to cover the financing for this project. 3 of the borrowings will come from electoral debt. They will be the first 3 borrowings, and then the final 4 will be non-electoral debt. So 7 borrowings over that time. There'll be 25-year bond issues that we're projecting. And since they will be staggered over 7 years, from the time of issuance of the first bond till the final payment of the last bond is a 32-year period. So when you hear 32 years, that's the amount of time it will take from the time we start paying the first bond till the time we pay off the last bond, 32-year period. So over that 32 years, with the yes vote for an average property in North Penn School District, just for this project, again, not counting anything else in the general fund budget, a yes vote would mean an average annual cost of an additional $244 per year. Okay, a no vote would mean $73 a year over those 32 years. And you notice there's not a do-nothing option here. I think we made it clear that it's either option one, option two, yes or no. There's not an option up here to do nothing. Something will happen. So we point to, if you take the $244 and subtract out the $73, what is the difference? So really, at the end of the day, what does the yes vote mean? It's really the difference between the yes and the no. And that's $171. So a yes vote would mean an additional $171 in your taxes when you compare it to what a no vote would mean. So if I take that $171 and I multiply it by 32, I get $5,473. So if you continue to own your home for the next 32 years, you would, for an average home, you would pay approximately $5,473 over 32 years in additional taxes for this project. Now, it's important to mention that these estimates were refined at the end of October based on interest rates that were in place at the end of October. Interest rates have actually fallen quite dramatically from the end of October to now by almost to the tune of 0.75% or 75 basis points, 0.75%. So right now, if we did the bond issues today, these numbers would be lower. Okay, these numbers would be lower. And we also have a hedge built in. Just like we had construction inflation built in for the cost estimates, we have a hedge built into interest rates. So we're hoping we're presenting a worst case scenario here in terms of cost. Okay? But everything, of course, is going to be market driven when the bond is actually floated and so forth. And just for reference, we do plan on issuing the first bond sometime in late 2024. Late 2024. Okay, because right now we can't issue any debt because we don't know what project we're financing, but we're looking at late 2024. Okay, so now let's get into how will the actual tax increases look? Kind of like year by year for 32 years, what will they look like? And again, we're going to focus in on that average $150,000 assessment. So if you look in this center row, and Dr. Bauer, you're pointing a millage of 0.3224 for me. That would be the first year, that's the 25-26 fiscal year. So tax bills come out in July. So July 1 of 2025 would be the first year you would see an impact on your taxes. That's the first year we would phase in the millage rate, the additional mills required to pay the debt for the project. Okay, whether it's option one or two, that's the first year. We're looking at option one or the yes vote right now. The no vote, the numbers would be lower. 0.3224 mills for an average property in North Penn School District is $48. So for that very first year, you would pay an additional $48 in your taxes for this project. In the second year, 26-27, you still pay that same $48. There's no increase in millage in the second year. In the third year, there's no increase in millage. In the 27-28 year, it's still $48. But you continue to pay that $48 each year. The $48 doesn't go away. In the 28-29 year, the millage goes up by 0.4364. That's $65. So now in that year, you not only paid the $48 that you paid in the previous year, you're paying a new $65. So in the 28-29 year, you're now paying an additional $114 for that year. Going into the next year, 20-30-31, more phase in a millage at that point. It's an additional $129 at that point in time. So now your tax bill would be up $243. The final phase in would occur in the 31-32 year, $75 now brings the tax bill up an additional, total, not additional, but total cumulative $319. And it stays at that amount until the year 2050. Okay, that amount would be, that millage amount would stay in our tax rate until 2050. So in 2050-51, something magical happens at that point. The millage rate actually goes down, right? You don't believe me, right? It goes down, 0.6694. And the reason why it goes down is, remember, a portion of this debt is electoral debt. And the law requires that once you pay off those bonds for the electoral debt, you need to remove the millage that was associated with that debt. So over a 2-year period, starting in 2050, 51, and 51, 52, we are removing the millage, the taxes that are a result of the referendum ballot question of $97 million. That gets removed from the equation. And now we're left with $176 until everything is paid off in 2055. Seems like a long time away, but that's when the final bond issue would be paid off 32 years from now. Okay, that makes a lot of sense to everyone, right? This is a big math equation. And Dr. Bauer majored in math in college and taught math. And I know sometimes we take it for granted. It seems easy to us, but hopefully these two slides kind of laid out, if you're in that average range, what it will mean year after year after year. And again, these are estimates at this point. Hopefully they will be lower. If interest rate environment continues to decline, they'll be lower. But that's where we stand right now based on estimates that we did at the end of October. So I thank you for your attention with this detail. And again, I appreciate your attendance. And Dr. Bauer is going to conclude things before we move on to Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Great job. And so we actually met with local leaders this morning at the ESC, and we had police chiefs, some of our township supervisors, township managers, leaders in the community, legislators, and we walked through this, and I actually kind of taught this. And I called on individuals in the audience, and I said, okay, so if your tax bill at the start of this example is, let's just pretend, we didn't go down here, but we said if your tax bill is $4,000 at the start, at the peak, what is the impact of this project with a yes vote? And Alan Malachowski, I'm not sure if you're in the room, but he's an auditor for Montgomery Township. Alan raised his hand, or he was voluntold, and he said $4,319. So that is the highest that bill would be as a result of this borrowing, or these borrowings, right? And obviously debt starts to fall off at the end, and it comes down. So this is a tangible, that was one thing we've been hearing from the community, like, show me, I don't understand your silly slides. Show me what it would do to my bill if I vote yes versus no. So thank you for that, Mr. Scrocky, and I know we're over time, so I'm going to give you a really quick summary of these last two slides and just say this is a timeline, a detailed timeline of when each component of the process will happen. Again, this will be posted, but here's the important part. The addition, which will be swing space to renovate the rest of the building, is scheduled to be completed around 2027. So students will benefit from the additions in the 2027 academic year. So people who are thinking, my child's in 7th grade, he or she will not benefit from this, that's not true, because the new spaces will have been built and will be utilized as swing space during the construction. So we can close certain areas of the building, move into that swing space, utilize the new space, and then move back when the old space was renovated. Okay? In the event that the referendum does not pass, we would need to bring in modular construction for that swing space, and that would be at the tune of roughly $15 million throughout the project. Okay? And hopefully that temporary modular construction would be removed. The other thing that I want to point out on this slide is the first class to come to North Penn High School with zero construction whatsoever. And everything's done, and you're 9th graders, and if you think about that timeline, the last thing to happen is 9th grade would move to the high school because you're utilizing that addition throughout the project. So once the project's all done, then 9th graders come. That is this year's 2nd grade class. They would be 9th graders 7 years from now. Okay, so just kind of give you a benchmark on how old kids would be. So 2027 for the new spaces, and then this year's current 2nd graders would come if everything goes as planned, and our most recent projects have been on time. If everything goes as planned, our current 2nd graders would walk into North Penn High School as 9th graders. Okay, just to kind of outline that timeline for you. Here's another slide with a lot of detail, will be posted. What's yes, what's no, and what happens in both examples. Okay, so first of all, many people don't want to raise their hands, stand up, whatever, no problem. Please submit your questions. We have people monitoring. We also have 4 people with microphones, 4 or 5, that are going to be circulating. They will be holding the microphone. You will not. Okay? I always say to the folks on our team here, give me a paragraph, not a page. But the focus here is questions. Okay? And we want to be efficient with our questions so we can keep moving. But there will be just like the last forum we had, I'm sure there will be unanswered questions. So keep them coming. We will submit a document with all those questions and post it on this website as well. Okay, so I'm going to kind of narrate and navigate, and then we'll hear from a question, and then I will throw it to someone. We have some of the experts here in the front, some panelists here as well, and I'll kind of play point guard. So let's start, just to be kind, all the way in the back with Mrs. McGeeheim, Director of Special Education. Megan, I thought you had someone. No?
I didn't.
Okay.
Just me.
All right. Mike's next. Oh, go ahead, Megan.
You made mention a number of times that there's only 2 school districts that don't have the 9th graders on. How does this proposed plan compare to the space usage of these other school districts that have upgraded? And I never heard of a performance gym. Do all these other school districts have a performance gym?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for that. So I'll answer a little bit of it, and then I'll pass some of the utilization to Mr. Schrader based upon their calculations for square footage and so forth. So in terms of a competition gym, what we currently have at North Penn High School, when Mr. Schrader says competition gym, we do not have a facility where we would host a large-scale district basketball championship game, for example. Right, so when they have neutral sites, North Penn High School is not one of those sites because our gym does not have ADA compliant bleachers. Our bleachers do not have railings. We do not have the seating space for a competition gym. So when he says competition gym, it's not just a gym for PE class, but it's actually to host events and actually have competitions, large-scale competitions with a couple thousand people in the stands. Okay, so if you look at some of the local high schools I'll point to, Souderton comes to mind just because it's adjacent to us. They have 3 full courts, large ADA compliant railings on all their bleachers, and they actually can pull those bleachers out, host several thousand people for an event, and have center court. That's what we're talking about when we talk competition gym. In terms of utilization of the modern facilities in modern high schools, Mr. Schrader, you're probably the best person to answer that.
And hopefully we're live here.
I hear it, I think.
Okay. So when we look at this kind of metric, we're really looking at square footage per student, and the anticipated square footage per student here is between 190 and 195 feet per student, and that's depending on whether you're looking at 4,000 or 4,200 students. The majority of buildings that are built around you, the new high schools that have been built, exceed that. There are 1 or 2 examples that are a little bit smaller than that, but this falls right in that sweet spot for how many square feet per student is typically utilized for a high school.
Okay, thank you. Dr. McKenna, we'll work my way this way and then come this way.
Hi. I have 3 points to really quickly hit on. Number 1 is security. I've brought this up before. Just seeing all the open space concerns me greatly. And I know we've talked about different ways to deal with that. I'm just still not comfortable with all the open space. The other thing is I have a question about specifically athletics with 9th graders. So at this point, they're split in 3 groups at the middle schools, and there are some 9th grade teams. So when they come to the high school, how will they get a place on a team when there's 1 team, and even will there be a 9th grade team for some of these sports? And my last thing is, I just keep hearing this in discussions. I see Facebook comments. Is there a middle ground between these 2? There has to be. What have we put into this plan that maybe we can dial back and still get some of both? Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mrs. Blanc. Mr. Nicholson, I think you're probably the best person to go down the security route and athletics route, and then I can supplement, and we'll add where we need to. Go ahead.
Absolutely.
Is this? Yeah, absolutely. As far as security goes, we currently are already, and we have been moving away from just a hide in the corner when the worst case scenario happens. We've been looking. Hello? Check, check. All right. As far as security goes, we have been moving away from a hide in the corner and hope that the intruder doesn't come in when the worst case scenario happens. With the proposed upgrades, with the proposed addition, there is a lot to be said for removing many of the nooks and crannies that exist at the current campus, that exist in the current building, and being able to see portions of the building from one side to the other. Not only can our school staff see what's happening in other portions of the building, but folks can see, again, worst case scenario, if an intruder is in the building and the best way to escape that person. Additionally, there are many security features that can be added. One of the buildings we visited in Virginia actually had a scenario where their security and their administration, not only did they have an ID card, but as part of that, they had a lockdown card where on any of their classroom doors or in various places in the building, they could swipe a red. It would automatically drop doors and cordon off areas of the building, make an audible announcement that they were in a lockdown. And it was immediate rather than trying to find a telephone, trying to find a plunger for an emergency and do it that way, so saving time there. As far as athletics, we do have some of our athletics in 9th grade that do have 3 teams. Many of our athletics, and increasingly, our middle school athletic programs are down to 1 team shared between buildings, and we've already brought a number of our 9th grade teams up here to the high school. It turns out for some of our athletics, having those teams spread out over 3 buildings, there aren't enough athletes to field 3 singular teams for each of our middle schools. So bringing them here and having them under one umbrella would make it easier in that instance. One of the other things we know we need to do and we're looking to do is create more opportunity with some of the athletic fields, with some of the synthetic turf, with the additional gym space. What we'd really like to do is be able to have the space to run more intramural programs and have kids involved in things that aren't necessarily competitive. Right now, we don't have the space to have any kind of intramural basketball program for students that just want to stay in shape and run around and have a good time with friends. We don't have the space for intramural soccer and some of those things that we feel we should be able to provide for our students.
Okay, and then the third question was regarding a middle ground and the 403 versus the 236, and is there something in between? As Mr. Schrader referenced, and David, I'll lean on you if you have anything to add, throughout, we are in a design and a conceptual phase where we are refining as much as we can. What we do know, as Mr. Scrocki outlined for you, is the projections that you see before you are anticipated worst case scenarios because we believe that's the prudent and responsible thing to show and to share with the community. The images you saw, they're ideas. They are some renderings of what Mr. Schrader kept saying, what you might see, what you could see. And typically, in a regular construction project, we aren't at this stage for another 1.5 years because, as he said, there's another 18 months worth of design. So there are things that could change between now and then. There are some of these renderings and some of the glass that Mrs. Blanc referenced, that might not be there. We have to obviously sit with focus groups and have design meetings, but for now, the responsible thing is for us to show you what it could be, offer an estimated cost for square footage, the right sizing of the building to not only have 9th graders, but to create those hallways that are more industry standard for our 10th through 12th graders. So that's the responsible number for now. Anything to add, Mr. Schrader?
No, the only thing I'd say from this point forward from a fixed design concept is we're going to be, from this point forward, in a constant tug of war, working through the budget to maintain exactly what it is. And it's a process where you work with all of the users, meaning community, students, faculty, administration, board, and any other community folks that are involved with that. And Dewey Engineering doing the cost estimating, so we're constantly balancing the design and the budget to make sure that we stay where we need to stay. So that kind of reflects on what you were just talking about, Dr. Bauer.
All right, so as I'm making my way from Dr. McKenna down this, I'm going to stop here for the online questions, whether it's Anna or Ms. Liberaski, and then we'll come over here to Dr. Waters.
Will there be one large gym Or will there be multiple gymnasiums that will be renovated? And will the pool be involved in this renovation?
Okay, just to summarize, I know the mic was kind of in and out. Will there be one large gym, and will there be renovations to the natatorium? I get that? Okay. I'll answer that one. So the additional gym, the competition gym, would have 3 courts, right? Which is pretty typical in a high school gym. So that would be additional. The Navy, what is currently the Navy and Columbia gyms, in the most recent renderings, a Navy gym exists, the Columbia gym may not. So there are 3 new courts, and the Columbia gym would come off. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. I've seen so many iterations as we've refined and worked our way through this. As for the natatorium will be renovated. The structure itself will still look the same, but it will be refinished, new finishes, new tiling, new plaster, all those things. Is that correct?
And then finally, you're adding fitness and athletic spaces, fitness and athletic training spaces outbound of the gymnasiums to add the additional spaces that are not there. So there are a whole series of athletic facilities available by the end of this.
And I know the question is going to be asked, is the natatorium addressed in either option?
It is,
okay.
Yes.
So obviously the competition gym is not in a no vote, but it is in a yes. The natatorium is addressed in both. Right. Dr. Waters, you sat down. Go ahead.
I have actually 3. Is that okay?
You don't get 3.
Right here?
I'm going to keep coming back.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Let's see. A couple of things. I'm David Crimmins. I'm going to be talking to voters who show up, and that's why I'm here. I'm glad I came. This nice lady said she was in favor of it because she thought it would help the education of the kids. Didn't hear much about that, although I do appreciate the statistical analysis that you get a 1 standard deviation improvement for typical bond, things like this. Believe it or not, that was the best thing about students. But I do have some blood running cold questions for your finance guy. Okay. Saw 2 things in your presentation that I'd like to wonder about. The first is 7 borrowings, right? I imagine each of those 7 borrowings will involve current interest rates at the time.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Well, I'm worried about interest rate risk. I'm old enough to remember 12% mortgage rates and 19% prime interest rates, and that's where we're heading. $10 trillion just got helicoptered into the economy over the past 5 years, roughly. We're in exactly the same spot. Every indication is interest rates are taking a small respite and then they're going to take off again. So that's my worry. There was a time. So the first question is, as you borrow over the next 7, 10, 8 years, are we subject to those kinds of interest rate variations? And while we're at it, the second thing that I looked at said, well, we did these assumptions based on a 4% increase in construction costs. And did anyone else read what I read? Okay. But they have increased much greater than that over the, so on each of those 7 iterations, I imagine Mr. Schrader doesn't want to work for free or lose money as we go forward. I imagine the construction bidder is going to want to recapture their costs. So are we subject to those kinds of risks for labor, materials, hard, soft costs, which I imagine we would be?
Great.
So that's it.
All right, so just to summarize, if anyone didn't hear it, and for the viewers at home, the questions pertain to interest rate for the separate borrowings. So were those separate borrowings, because you don't borrow the money all at once, you borrow the money as you need it, are they subject to the fluctuations in interest rates? So I don't know if Mr. Scrocky wants to answer that, or Zach from PFM.
Yeah.
Zach?
We have our representative here, Zach Williard from PFM. He's going to address the interest rate question for you, sir. Thank you.
If you can turn, okay, I'm on. Yeah, so Zach Williard from PFM, so we're the district's financial advisor. So the way that it is structured now is we would borrow 7 times over the plan. Now that may change depending on, what the actual draw schedule looks like once you get construction bids back and you kind of plan this out over the multiple years. The thought process is that you would hit the market at different times over that place in order to hedge your interest rate risk. We don't know where rates will be, as you go through this. So you will hit the market at slightly higher times, you will hit the market at lower times. But the thought is that over that period, then you are hedging your interest rate risk. Each of the bonds would be fixed rate. So once you lock in the interest rate, it will not change. Each of the bonds will have a call feature so that if you hit the market at one of the high points, you can come back and refinance the debt in the future. So that would kind of be built in to all of the financing plan.
So the second question there, outside of the borrowings, was the construction inflationary costs. Mr. Schrader, I don't know if you're the best person, Mr. Scrocky, but feel free to work together.
Yeah, probably the best, and certainly Mr. Scrocky has been following this too, but Mr. Lynch from Dewey Engineering is one of the best representatives of the inflation rates that we will be seeing in the future. None of us know. It's a gamble, right? And so that is a challenge, and that's a good question. We saw Engineering News Record had an article that stated that in 2021 we saw a 12% escalation. In 2022 we saw, I think it was an 8% escalation. It fell to 6% in 2023, and most experts in the construction field are anticipating the 3.5% to 4% escalation from this point forward. And we of course put that in quotes because it's a gamble every time. So the team knows that we'll have to work through whatever those escalation rates are at that time. The good news is we're going to bid this at one point in time for the most part. And so we'll know on X day what that total value is. It's not like you're actually bidding these over the balance of these years that the borrowings occur. They all occur at one point. You're locked into those prices at that point.
The only thing I'd add to that, sir, is that we're anticipating at this point in time to conduct a competitive bidding process in the spring, late spring, early summer of 2025. So once those bids are awarded, we have to, per the school code, we need to award the contract to the lowest responsible bidder. Once those contracts are awarded, that's the price. So construction inflation could go up 20% the next year. We're locked into those prices at that point.
Really great questions. All right, Mr. Hassler, let's make our way to this side of the room.
Is there a rough estimate for total savings on middle school repairs and annual savings by not having to transport ninth graders between the middle and high schools with the yes option?
Great question. So the question for the group is the cost estimation in savings for not transporting our ninth graders to the high school. I have to imagine that that is fairly minimal in terms of transporting them here, because it's 2 buses and the furthest middle school is probably Penfield, I would guess. Would you say that it's a minimal?
Minimal, less than $100,000 a year.
So Mr. Scrocky just said less than $100,000 a year to transport the students from the ninth grade to the high school for their instruction. Good question. All right, so I went this way. Megan.
I heard a lot of statements regarding inspiration and collaboration from exposure to outside areas and large open spaces. What evidence is there that supports better educational outcomes from those features? I have 2 more questions. I'll do them all at once and then be quiet. I saw massive amounts of additional glass and open space. What does that mean for energy efficiency in the future, especially when we're looking at really expensive energy costs in the future? And the last question I had was, do the tax numbers presented include the debt service?
Great. Okay. So the last question is the lowest hanging fruit there. Did the projections include the debt service? The answer to that question is yes. Okay. The next question was regarding estimated increased costs due to HVAC costs for larger spaces and energy efficiencies. I don't see Jeff. Is there someone that would best answer that? I can tell you what Jeff said in my group.
Oh, go for that.
Again, I am not a heating and air conditioning expert, but I can tell you that I was with Jeff, who is the engineer, who was up in EPOD with me, and he said that the systems we currently have in North Penn High School are the most inefficient systems that he has seen for heating and cooling in any high school. And he said, while there will be increased costs, I believe the increased savings from the windows and the systems themselves will offset. Of course there's going to be increased costs because the building is bigger, but the current spaces that exist, he said, I really don't think you're going to see a difference. But Mr. Schrader, Mr. Lynch, anybody want to try?
Well, there will continue to be modeling for the facilities we go, and I suspect that, as we've stated, this is very conceptual in nature. I suspect you will see reduction in glass areas as we go. We still believe that copious amounts of daylight are critical to these facilities. I would urge you to spend a day in one of the classrooms that are over an APOD versus some of the new classrooms that we see in some of the other buildings, and just see how you feel at the end of the day. And feeling does contribute to a person's well-being and learning capabilities. There are studies out there that reflect daylighting and its impact on learning. There are studies about space and so on that contribute to students' learning, and I think we could probably bring some of those for you to share with you. But ultimately, the goal really is to try to bring daylighting into these spaces and try to connect the indoor and the outdoor. It's just a contemporary way of handling architecture, and the engineering systems have come a long way to trying to allow us to do that.
So we did post the study that was referenced. I believe it was at the finance meeting this month. So it's a 70-page document. It's really good fun reading. However, that document is posted. We'll link it on the website as well for the research pertaining to, and it's kind of disaggregated by the improvements. So I will, Christine, you want to go again? You want to take a different platform rather than Facebook, go email, and then we'll come to Mike down on this side. Go ahead, Anna.
Where do school board members stand on the issue, and can we hear from a school board member for their opinion?
Okay, so Mrs. Stoll and Ms. Wesley are here before us this evening. I saw Mrs. Stoll lean forward, so go ahead, Tina.
Right, I was just having a little bit of trouble hearing you, Anna. Did you say what is our opinion on this project? Okay, so yeah, so I think I am a North Penn alum, and when I do go through this high school, it does look exactly like it did back in 1983 when I graduated here. And when I see the video of Dr. Bond in the 1995, I believe it was, saying how this building is 25 years old and needs to be renovated, and we're here, like, what, 30 years later, it's so past time to do something here. And I want to make sure that we're doing a really good job of making sure that the school is not only renovated, but brought up into 21st century educational standards. So I want to see all those things that the ninth graders would benefit from bringing them up here. And I want to see things like the tech school being used. And I just want to give all the kids the opportunity that they can. And I think in the 90s, when we discussed having a second high school, we kind of missed an opportunity. And this is our next opportunity to make transformational change to our district for a generation. And I just want to make sure that everybody's informed and makes an informed vote on January 16th. So I'm hoping that we have a yes vote.
Dr. McKenna.
Yeah, two questions. So one's a simple one. On the expense breakdown, is contingency included in these numbers, or is that above and beyond what's shown?
Go ahead.
Contingency is included in the numbers presented.
Okay, good. Second question is, we're in the design phase now, and there are subsequent phases, especially as we get into the build. Is there a thought or consideration of having some sort of governance group that are made up of the taxpayers, whereby we can be a part of those decisions, those change requests, things like that may increase the cost of this project?
I can throw that question to a number of us. Tom, do you want to speak a little bit to the typical process, maybe Act 34 hearings, et cetera?
Absolutely, Dr. Bauer. Am I on? Through the process of the design, we will be modeling for not only energy costs, but also looking at design to figure out how many additional staff are necessary in the building. All those costs will be shared at the Act 34 hearing. That hearing will be publicly offered, and everything will be shared during that meeting. Subsequent to that, then we will be finalizing all the construction documents and going to bid.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. We're having just so everybody knows, we're having a really hard time hearing questions up here. I don't know if it's the acoustics in the room or what it is, but try to pronounce and enunciate as best you can. Go ahead, Dr. Waters.
So I have a couple questions too. One relates to the size and the control of the crowd in the hallways, because you're already about 700 over what the hallway should accommodate now. You're going to bring in ninth graders, it's going to be another 1,100, so you got 2,000 more needed space. Is this widened hallway going to be enough for accommodating 2,000 actual people, since you're already short? So that's one question. So also policing and security was a thing. Are you going to have increased security? What's going to be the cost to that increased security? Okay, I'm worried about some of the two-stage seating kind of thing. Do you think the high school students are mature enough to handle that kind of situation? Yes, in college they can, but in a high school situation, I don't know if they're mature enough. Or are we going to have problems because of that kind of design? I agree with having ninth grade students in here, and I apologize for my lack of previous awareness, but looking at the growth of the community, are we being short-sighted? Should we really have two high schools? This high school is getting way too large for this many people. Plus, the opportunities for each individual student is less when you have a student body so large. If you had student bodies that were lower, you'd have more chances for maybe more students to be on an academic team, on the varsity level, or this, that, or the other thing. So I apologize for my lack of knowledge with the two high school thing from before, but if somebody could help me out with that.
Yeah, so I'll try my best to get them all. One was hallways and wayfinding. 2 was security and large spaces. And then 3 was second high school. Good summary? Yeah, got it. Yep, okay. So the first question in terms of hallways and spacing, so yes, and those who took the tour, the folks that I spoke with, talked a lot about that the classroom structures as they are will exist, right? Where classrooms currently are, aside from the addition, they will still exist. However, some of the cores of the pods that are currently utilized for other purposes or utility closets, that is what will be opened up. Mr. Schrader's speaking of A33 or C39, where you saw the music room, those spaces being opened to increase the capacity in the hallways. We have hallways here that are, in some cases, 7 feet, some cases 12 feet, that are woefully insufficient for our current traffic flow. With the additional 1,000 students, with the additional square footage in the building to house additional students, and these larger hallways and throughways, we certainly believe that will be addressed, and that's part of the engineering that goes behind it. Related to the spaces themselves and whether or not high school kids are capable of being mature enough to handle them and utilize them, I would say to that unequivocally yes. And the reason I say that is because I've seen it. We went to visit high schools where they're doing it. We've heard from principals and superintendents where they said, we heard a lot from our teachers, oh, that can't work here, and it does. At Upper Marion, for example, that's the one where we took a busload of community members to go see. The superintendent and the principal said, we utilize these throughout the entirety of the day. Whether it's for a class, whether it's for a performance, whether it's for a club or a group meeting. It has been my experience that if you treat kids like adults, they act like them. And then the last question was just about the second high school. Mr. Schrader, I don't know if you have your estimates in front of you, or Steve, if you have them, but I know you do. Oh, Steve's nodding and smirking at me. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, so we actually considered, looked at this as part of our option study that we were doing last year, and the cost for a second high school was prohibitive. It was somewhere in the $500 to $600 million range. So there was also another issue about site acquisition to get the proper acreage to build a second high school. We're having trouble finding 15 acres for a transportation facility. Imagine 40 to 50 acres for a new high school, a second high school. So the exorbitant price tag of $500 to $600 million plus site acquisition concerns, we pretty much moved on past that option pretty quickly.
And just to add to the acreage needed, if you were looking to acquire land for an elementary school, that's dramatically different than a high school, right? Student parking, athletic fields, it's just very, very different. But aside from that price that Mr. Scrocky just quoted, and I was speaking to a family earlier tonight, and I said, I don't remember what the price was, but I know it was dramatic and it was cost prohibitive. Not only would it be somewhere in between $500 and $600 to acquire the land and build a new high school, this high school would still need the repairs, right? So you're still talking about that 236 number if it is a basic renovation of the current structure. So as Mr. Scrocky outlined, the $97 million that would be above the Act 1 index, we're talking $500 million more than that, which is just not an option at this stage. Mr. Hassler.
The whole thing is based on a vote, and the vote is based on current registered voters in the North Penn School District. Is that inclusive of the current rolls that are on the registers now, or is there an open date up until an open date that people can register, and then it's closed after that date?
It's January. Mike's over here. Mr. Paston, if we can get him a mic. Mike McKenna, can you get Mr. Paston a microphone, please?
It's the same process in any election. 30 days before the voter rolls close, if you get an absentee ballot now, an automatic absentee ballot, you will get one. You have to register for that every year, but that year goes till the end of January. So if you got a ballot in the mail the last month, you will get one for this election. So everything's the same, process-wise, deadline-wise. Nothing is different. The absentee ballot application's the same. The deadlines are the same.
So just to be clear, because I had a question this week that I was confused on, for the mail-in ballot, I know if you registered for a mail-in ballot, you have the option to register for the year or register for one election, right? So if you registered for a mail-in ballot in November, but you chose the option for just that election, you do need to register again, correct?
Right. The absentee ballot is the term for one election. You're not going to be here, you need a ballot. The mail-in ballot, which started a few years ago, is an annual registration, and then you will get mailed a ballot for every election that occurs that year. In this case, there'll be 3 for North Penn residents instead of 2. You'll have to redo that application starting February 1st. But luckily, this falls right before that deadline, so you'll get a ballot in the mail.
Great. Thank you for that answer, and thank you for that question. All right, Dr. McKenna, since we're over there, grab one of those hands.
Hello, my name is William Patchell. I spoke to the board many times over 12 years, and I came from Ocala, Florida, just to make this meeting, to make sure that I would make my positions known. Number one is, where are the provisions for the next contract for our staff? If you think they're going to take a contract at 2% for 30 years, you're wrong. If you look at Mac, if you look at Ford, you look at GM, the contract settlement today is 30, 40, 50. The little guys with the brown pants are UPS. They're making $100 an hour. So where are these teachers going to be? Are they going to be underneath one of these buses, checking the underside out because they got thrown under there? You have to remember that the staff and the teachers, Mr. McKenna, he's doing a great job. You have to remember that the staff is the motivation, it's the passion, it's a calling, and they need to be justly compensated. Not these stupid dead bricks. They want to sell you a $100,000 pickup truck.
Mr. Patchell, it's always good to see you. Thank you. So I do believe I can say with some level of confidence here, and I know we have some leadership from NPEA and NESPA in the audience, that their contract process, we are required by law, their contract ends this year, and we are required by law to start those discussions in January. We have had preliminary discussions with them, and we're working towards what Mr. Patchell's asking for. And when we have news for that or an agreement in place, we would certainly communicate that. Go ahead, Mrs. McGeeheim, all the way in the back.
I had a question about the financials, actually a couple related questions.
So the 403 million is roughly similar to a presentation I believe PFM did March 13th. And at that time, the total debt service on the 403 million would be, over that 32-year period that you discussed earlier, 809 million. Can you confirm that? And related to that, you tonight indicated that the historical millage increase has been about 2.8% increase, and I think next fiscal year it's 5.3. Those tax increases on the normal general fund are not included in the tax increases that were quoted on there. And finally, there's 20 other schools that will require refurbishment over the next few years. What's the capital plan to address that? And what's the budget for millage increases related to that over this time horizon? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So the question about the millage and the tax implications in the forecasting and the projections that we saw from Mr. Scrocchi, obviously facilitated by PFM. I do know that the rates that we know as of late October were reflected in the modeling. That's correct, right? So certainly that millage rate, I think the comment was made, that's the 5.3 for next year and so forth. That's not reflected. It is reflected in the modeling. We do have updated numbers and we get them every month or two. And so now it's whether or not we have the most up to date. So we continue to model as the new numbers come out. Anything to add, Steve?
I do. I think part of the question was about, in our presentation earlier this spring, it was a total of $800 million when you include principal and interest for the repayment. That's actually not accurate because that includes existing debt as well in that total. So that number wasn't on a chart, but that included, at the time, it was roughly $70 million of existing principal and interest. So you would take the $800 million and subtract out about $70 million. So the total repayment, just like a mortgage, when you buy a home, you're paying interest as well. There's interest payments that we would need to make. That total over 32 years would be roughly $730 million.
Okay, great answer. All right, so I went to Megan, I went to Mike. Deanna? Go ahead, Deanna.
Thanks for having this forum. Really, I mentioned to Mr. Schrader, when I came in, one of the presentations that was happening right here was about the Main Street corridor, and to be able to see that and have it explained in that fashion was it actually clarified, I think, some of what's in the document. Because when you see the document in the mailer and you see this overhead view, you see colored pictures of where we're adding space, but not necessarily what we saw in the video there. So that was definitely a clarification. I've got a couple things. So the first one, why in a no vote are we spending on athletic fields as opposed to physical infrastructure needs? So in what was described in the no vote and what would be done as part of that 200 and some odd million showed the rear of the property, if we're standing from here, the transportation area, the development of the radio station site. To me, that looks like that's going to be, you could be looking at a $13, $15 million expenditure on the backside of the property where there's physical infrastructure that could be addressed with those funds. Secondly, is there any advantage to using temporary mods? We talked about temporary mods cost about $15 million. Well, is there a way or is there a method in which we could use temporary mods to accelerate the process of construction and renovation should a yes vote, succeed? To me, just walking back and looking at that E-Pod, that mechanical room is a ticking time bomb. I think kudos to the staff that has kept that thing running.
Let's give a round of applause for that part.
You can feel the transformers by just standing adjacent to them. Right. That equipment, I hope that we get through this process with no problems there. As it was mentioned, the generator's in the same room. That is you would never consider that in today's construction. And lastly, the estimate for the final design, when we enter final design, and then how long are we looking at for a review period? Again, looking at acceleration, whatever we could do. People mentioned, about interest rates and bond issues and everything else. All of this must be considered. What could we do to assuming a yes wins, what can we do to accelerate the project to serve the community the best?
Great, thank you. Thank you for your well-articulated questions. So in summary, well, let me back up. One was the cost in a no vote of the athletic fields on the WMPV property. What would that be? And is that a significant amount of money that could be invested in infrastructure here inside the brick and mortar building? Two was, oh shoot, I was doing pretty well. Temporary modulars and the acceleration. Yep. Could we accelerate? Cost. Yep. Okay. So I'll go to you for cost estimates. Those fields, I believe, in a no vote were natural fields utilized for, say, soccer, ultimate frisbee, practice fields, et cetera. So I don't believe $13 million is a reasonable number for those fields. Is that correct?
Well, so you hit three topics, and I'll try to address each of those. So no vote athletic fields, movement of the transportation site. There's a funny thing that we have going on here, in that we have, as soon as you do the renovation to the level that you're trying to do it, you also need to provide accessibility throughout everything, including the site. And in this situation, we do not have the level of accessibility that we need to, with a full renovation, to all of the stadiums and playing fields. So what happens is you end up in a situation where you've got to do something about the parking area, and the natural progression here is move the transportation center, get the acreage you need, and go ahead and do parking in that area. So that's a funny trigger point. Then the second one, of course, is you're spending some money on the performing arts, because we're going to take care of the auditorium, and we're adding some small music areas as well, or appropriately sized music areas, but a smaller addition to the building. So that's taking care of some of the athletic needs as well on the site by taking care of the radio station site. So those are the no vote athletic field costs. Temporary mods in the $15 million, or whatever version of those would work in the yes vote. We did do the analysis of whether modulars would actually accelerate all of that and offset the cost of bringing those modulars onto the site, and they did not offset the cost. So that analysis was done, but it's an excellent question and one that should be asked. So we're really in great shape if we can do the additions, build all the classrooms, and then start moving students around the building into those additions. So that's the phasing concept here. And finally, the estimate question about when you get into a final design, final estimating, and all of that. We do estimates up until bid date. The construction managers and ourselves and the owners will all work very carefully on alternates to make sure that we have enough alternates in place that this number ends up where we need it to end up. And so on bid day, that's the cost of the project. Of course, the contingencies are there for the kinds of things that happen on site that we don't know are going to happen on site, or for the renovation issues that we're going to run into. But essentially, that bid date number, which is going to be spring of next year, spring of 2025, pardon me, and the contingencies that we have in place are what the project's going to cost, and the team just keeps working to that.
So I know I said originally 90 minutes. We're now at nearly 2 hours, and my apologies, but I do think it's time well invested. I do want to go to another online question, and then I will be available, we will be available. Please come forward, ask questions, email me, email this address you see, and we'll put together a list of all the questions and answer them all. As you can see, there's no stupid question. They all deserve to be asked. Our objective is to have an informed community when they go to vote. That's the objective. So I'm respectful of the yes, respectful of the no. I want your questions to be answered, and I assure you I'll be available. Online?
I would like to know what current high school students think about the proposed changes. They are the ones who could probably tell us best if these ideas will work.
Okay. Well, being asked by a student herself, Anna. So the question is, if you didn't hear it, what do students think? And Anna is here tonight because she's been a part of our Facilities and Operations Committee for over 2 years at this point. She's the student representative on the Facilities and Operations Committee. That's why she's helping to facilitate. So Anna, why don't you take that question? What is your take on the process, given that you've been in all the meetings?
I'd be happy to take that question. So first of all, hi, my name is Anna Weatherwax. I'm a senior here at the high school. As mentioned, I've been involved in the process. I've been hearing all about the renovation. For me personally, this renovation, I recognize it's something that I'm not going to see. I'm graduating next year. I won't be here to experience the building. But I do know the importance of all these changes that we're planning to make. My brother, his name is Jack. He's an 8-year-old. He's in 2nd grade. So, like we mentioned, he will be in the first class of 9th graders to go through the high school. So, as a senior walking through these halls, trying to walk through these halls, given how cramped they can be, I recognize that they need to be expanded. The classrooms need to be changed. It's hard for us to learn in these environments. And seeing all these proposed changes means a lot to me as a student because I can see how all of these ideas can come together and help the future generations, like my brothers, help them go into the world that's constantly changing. We need a building that changes with them. So all of these ideas can come together. It can help them have a better learning environment. And while I'm not able to be there to see how it'll all turn out for everyone, I'm very excited to see how it'll turn out for the younger students.
Okay. Thank you, Anna. I am told that there's one more, and then I wanted to go to Ms. Wesley. Dr. McKenna. Where's Dr. McKenna? Who we got? Familiar face from the video?
Thanks, Dr. McKenna. First of all, thank you all, and thank everybody for being here. This is really refreshing to be in a school setting like this and talk about real important issues in a very positive and very engaging way. I think that's something that school boards and school districts have been missing for a couple of years, and I think this is fantastic. As a teacher and a graduate, I have a weird perspective that I'm getting very old by the day, and I'm old enough to have been here in the mid-90s when the second high school was not built. I'm old enough that I've been in the district as a teacher when the middle schools were renovated, and I'm old enough to also now be able to look back at the last 15 to 25 years to see how we evaluate those decisions after the fact. And there's a lot of people in the district that are very upset that we don't have air conditioning in our middle schools, and I think rightfully so. I think in the 21st century that we have on air conditioning buildings is kind of amazing that a district our size hasn't taken care of that. But I ask those same people to think about this. When those buildings were renovated 15 years ago, the kids who were in middle school weren't even born yet. And so those families probably didn't really think too much that those projects affected them. Well, 15 years later, they are the kids who are now in those buildings that aren't renovated enough. When Dr. Bond in 1996 sat at the school board meeting and said that the addition of K-Pod didn't address the bottlenecks around the rest of the building, well, that was 25 plus years ago, and here we are today still talking about that same issue. One of the slides from the very beginning had all the programs and all the groups that didn't exist in 1971 that do exist now. I know about money enough to know that everything's getting more expensive and our incomes aren't going up, and it's very difficult to even wrap our head around these numbers. And all the questions tonight about taxes and about what it's going to mean in our pocket, it's complex. It is not easy to answer. But at the end of the day, if we continue to approach projects at North Penn by kicking the can down the road and doing the minimum and staying within extremely tight budgets, as we can see by being here today, the problems never go away and the cost to complete projects never go down. We have, as everybody has said, a generational opportunity right now to make this the high school that it needs to be for the population that we have, for the programs that we have, for the kids that we have coming up into this building. And I realize how difficult it is to tackle this money subject, but sometimes we just have to really look at what value we're getting for the dollar. And if we save a lot of money, it might make us feel good now, but the problems are never going to go away. And so I think the comparisons that we're talking about here about the minimal or the maximum, I know there's a lot of money saved, but there's also a lot of things that just won't be done that clearly need to be done. So I just want to thank everybody for considering all that and for being here to ask all the questions about that, because I think, as everybody has said too, being informed is the most important thing, and being informed by the people that have all the answers is paramount. So thank you.
So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Wesley with next steps and how to stay engaged, and in particular as the chair of our Facilities and Operations Committee. But I really do want to emphasize how productive and cordial and respectful this has been, and I think it's a testimony to this school district and the people who live here and how much they care about our school district. So whether you are voting yes or whether you're voting no, thank you for being here and thank you for caring about our kids. Ms. Wesley, if you can talk a little bit about facilities and operations and how people can stay plugged into the process.
Thank you, Doc. Is it on? No. No? Is it on?
Here, try this one.
There we go.
Okay, this is on. So, hi, yes, I'm Kathy Wesley, chairperson for Facilities and Operations under the direction of Mr. Schneider, who is at the end of the table here. Going forward, I see Facilities and Operations operating in an environment that provides technical information regarding the project all the way through from what happens after the referendum through contracts being signed. At each meeting, the way we've laid it out, and it's a massive project and undertaking, the expectation from the board, from the committee, is that every open item that is open at that time, that phase in the project, will be included on an agenda. It doesn't necessarily mean action was taken, but when we talk about some of the permitting issues, some of the zoning issues, the traffic study, some of those pieces that are important now, even though we haven't started more detailed design, they will be included. We'll be looking at every aspect of it, and again, as the dynamics of the schedule develops, we'll be updating it. At least it'll be on there, so the community, administration, the board, we all can see what's happening. It doesn't come off of that agenda until it's been dispositioned. So that's how I'd really like this to go, to be completely transparent with the community. Some of it is technical, some of it's not technical, some of it's fun. I think it's all fun. The other piece too, and it was mentioned, that's about the project. Most important, as well as the project, is the 10-year capital project plan, which looks at all of the other buildings. And I've said many times, and they're probably sick of hearing me say it, we have to take care of our other assets that are out there, the existing assets. So Mr. Schneider takes care of prioritizing the 10-year capital project plan, and so we will be aware of what we need to take care of as we have our eyes on this big endeavor, but we'll have that as well. So I hope that's what you wanted.
Test, test. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Wesley. That was excellent. And I'll just close out with, we continue to be available. Please email, please reach out. Happy to sit down. If you have a development and you think it would be beneficial for me or someone else up here to come and speak with folks at a community gathering, we're here. I can tell you that tonight is a night that I'm really, really proud to be your superintendent. So thank you for everything. We'll talk to you over the next month.